right, so today I'm going to start off with something very interesting is what people kind of go through, right? And I'm going to talk about something that everyone goes through and some of you are going through right now, okay? Now, what is this? What people go through is what you call like the super crazy difficult time that you're like, have you ever had that difficult time when you actually think, is God with me? Like, God, are you really there? Like, if you were there, it wouldn't happen like this. Like, we're talking like, there's like the regular stuff and then there's like the deeply, even more like, wow, God, is this really happening to me? Someone who believes in you, right? This stuff happens to non-believers, but not to believers kind of thing, right? And then even after that happens, it gets worse, right? And you're like, God, like, are you? And you kind of get really desperate and you're wondering in your hearts, is God really there? Right? And it's interesting because you go to church and you meet a pastor like me and I'll tell you like, don't rely on God, right? No, I won't say that. We usually say the right thing, right? Hey, it's okay. God is with you. Don't worry about it. Just pray and God will be with you, right? And you kind of listen to that and you're like, okay, I'll try it out. But then nothing gets better. Like your situation is always the same. It's so bad. You're like, there's nothing different about my life than everyone else, and it just sucks I'm so stressed, right? I'm just so stressed right now, and things aren't getting any better. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of, it's kind of actually really spiritual, because Matthew had this really interesting, what am I looking at? Oh yeah, Matthew's looking at, no, not Matthew, sorry, that's me, right? I was like, Matthew over there, he had an interesting video, and in the video, you brought up a story, right? And the story was of who in the Bible? Joseph, okay, and that's who I'm going to talk about today. I'm talking about Joseph, right? So he's super, I didn't even see his video, but yeah, it's just, we're on the same, he's like my brother, right? Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story about Joseph, and I want you to think about like the feeling you would have, and if your situation could be any worse than Joseph's, okay? Just like, I want you to think to yourself, could it be worse? Could it really be worse, okay? So, let's start off with Joseph. Now, Joseph was really, really young. Okay, when he was really young, his mother is who? Everyone knows? Rachel. Okay, he had a brother named? And his cousin was? Oh, really? You're going to answer everything else, but not this one? Who's his cousin, right? Who's his aunt, right? So either way, right? So he's got one brother, he got 10 other brothers, and the brothers, what do they think of Joseph? His other 10 brothers? They hated him to death, right? Right? And why did they hate him? Was it because he was so good looking? No. Oh yeah, maybe, right? Partially he was good looking. But we're talking when he's really young, like in like young teens, right? His father loved him more than all of his other brothers, gave him this nice, what's that musical called? Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, right? And everything was just so great about this guy, Joseph. And at 17 years old, what were you guys doing at 17? At 17, you guys were in high school. Right? You're in high school. In high school, at senior year, his brothers sold him to slavery. Right? You gotta think about that to yourself, right? You have this dream, right? This guy was an amazing dreamer, and his most famous dream was he would become such a great person that even his father, his mother, everyone would bow down to him, and he had this crazy dream that he'd be this great person. But at 17 years old, his own brothers sell him into slavery, right? And it was like, and there's a crazier part. It was option 2. Option 1 was, let's kill him, right? You gotta think about that. It's like, oh, let's kill him. It's like, no, let's sell him to slavery. Well, yeah, at least I can get that Xbox I wanted. All right, let's go sell it, right? No, I want that iPhone, right? So they sold him, right? Now, he goes over to this official's house. What was his name? Potiphar. Okay, now, he believes that God is with him. Like he's a believer of God, right? Joseph believed, right? So he goes over to Potiphar's house, becomes a servant in the household, okay? Now, for you, in that situation, how long would it take for you to kind of break down and say, God is not with me, where are you, God? How long do you think? How many months, how many days, how many years? What do you think? Huh? A few months maybe, you kind of break down. Anyone else? Anyone go a year before they break down? 2, 3? No? No one? Huh? Huh? A week. There you go. 1 week. We're getting honesty where the millennials are here, right? 3 days, right? Joseph was a servant at Potiphar's house for 13 years. You gotta think about that. 13 years, right? If you think of like 13 years, like from what point would you say to yourself, no, this is not it. God, where are you, right? I've been doing this for 2 weeks. What's happening? I only have 12 years and 50 weeks left, right? You got to think about this. 13 years he was in that situation. And then what happens next? Does it get better? His master's wife accuses him of rape, and the judge sides with the wife and sends him into prison. So now first you're a servant for 13 years, and the next step is, God, where are you? And then you go to prison, God, where are you? Right? You gotta think about this to yourself, how bad that is right now. Accused of rape, and you go to like the dungeons, right? You're in prison. And in prison, right, he becomes someone who's like, the interpreter of dreams. And he interprets dreams, and then he had this one time, he had like this windfall, like this great thing happened, where the people close to the king come into prison, right? It was a cupbearer and the baker. They were the king's cupbearer and the baker. They're both thrown in prison, they both have dreams, and Joseph says, boom, this is your dream, and this is your dream. You're gonna die, and you're gonna live, right? And the interesting thing is, I don't have the verse, but at the very end of Genesis chapter 40, the last thing he says to, I believe it's the cupbearer, he says to cupbearer, hey cupbearer, please remember me. Like, remember me when you go back up, okay? So now Joseph thinking like this, dude, I just interpreted his dream, things are gonna go well, yes. And the cupbearer says, I will remember you, I will not forget you. And you know what Genesis chapter 41 verse 1 says? When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had, the next verse is 2 years later that you're in a dungeon in prison. Like, I don't know what happens in prison, but I don't think it's a spa, right? I don't think it's like this place where everything's like, hey, okay, aerobics at 9, right? And then we're gonna have all these other great programs planned for you guys in prison, right? We're gonna lift chains and everything, right? It's gonna be great, right? So when you think about this, prison's not like a great place. Right? So here, he's in prison for another 2 years. This dude that he helped, he forgot. And if you read later in chapter 41, the crazy part is, Pharaoh has a dream 2 years later, and he goes, oh, I remember there was someone there who helped me, right? Now, if you met someone like this, I'm sure many of us has friends like this too, like what would you be thinking when you look at this person again? Hey, how's it going 2 years later? Yeah, it was pretty fun. Had a good time. Thanks for remembering me. And we'd be so pissed, right? But if you look at this person, right, when we look at the story of Joseph, we go right into the video. He interprets a dream of Pharaoh and he becomes a prime minister. And you know how many years later it took before his family actually met him and when his dream was actually fulfilled? It took 20 years for that dream to be fulfilled, which means you have to think about this carefully. It's not just waiting, right? Not waiting, it's waiting, right? Waiting for Joseph was 13 years of servanthood and like another 2 years in prison in a dungeon. And then after that, another 4 to 5 years of working. And then finally, his dad, his family comes down to see him. You got to think about how crazy this is, right? When you look at the story of Joseph, right? How does that make you feel about your problems, right? And the thing is, I'm not trying here to compare to say that, oh, your problems are nothing. No, it's not about your problems are nothing, right? But the question we have to ask ourselves is, what keeps him going? Like, what keeps him to believe? What gives him faith when the problem is so bad and it's 13 years and then it gets worse for another 2 years? Like, what keeps you going, right? Now, today, what's the title again? Everyone say it today. Yeah, I'm making you say it because I don't want to say it. I don't want to say this, right? I'm like, gosh, did I pick the right title, right? I'm like, I didn't want to even leave to go to 7-Eleven because I might get hit by a car or something, right? I'm like, oh, I'll stay inside, right? And they're like, would you like some candy? Might choke on it. It's okay, right? I'm fine. You want some snacks? No, it's okay, right? I'll just drink my saliva. I'll be fine, right? So here we are in this situation now, and now what I want to bring up to you is, why shouldn't we rely on God? Of course, I'm not telling you don't rely on God. I'm telling you to don't rely on God. Two different things. Why? Because one is talking about from our regular perspective, and one is talking about what the perspective I'm trying to share with you today. the first reason why you have to understand why the situation is the way it is time. Now, what the heck does that mean? Time. Time. What do you mean time? Why is it in the worst situation for 13 years, we hear nothing about conversations between Joseph and God for 13 years, but only later, like 13 years, it ends and then something happens? Why is time so important? Because all of us, as we learn about God, there's so many things we forget as we live in our faith, which is what? Don't we sing those songs? Like, I went to church, like, I'm pretty old, right? So, way back in the days, we have like different praise songs. And we have this one song we sang all the time. In His time. In His time. And we like, He makes all things beautiful in His time. And we sing the song where like hands are up and tears come down our face. In His time, Lord, please make me every day, right? And we're singing these songs. We're talking about in His time, right? And we talk about God's time, right? Which means if you think about this, if you really believe God has a timing for everything, like God has a time, then you have to think to yourself is, wait, why isn't God doing anything for me right now? I'm in prison for 13 freaking years and God isn't doing anything, right? Look at your situations right now or the ones that you've gone through. You look to yourself and say, oh God, why is this happening? God, God, God. And we always say God, right? That's the only time we really really plead, God, why is this happening to me? We say it all the time, right? When it's the most difficult time, like, God, why? But the reality is what? Is because things happen in the right time, which means that, God's not going to be constantly like, you think about this. You know how weak people are? This is how weak we are as human beings, right? Like think about this. Do you really need someone to tell you constantly, I'm with you. Oh, please, okay. Because if you're not with me, like imagine I'm with my wife. And it's like, hey, if you don't say you're with me, then I'm going to find another woman. Like, what would you really think if you're my wife? Oh, but say you're with me, please. Oh, no, you got to be with me all the time. Don't go to work. Just come with me to work because I need you with me all the time. Oh, please, I'm very clingy and I want you right there. Please, I'm going to the bathroom. It's okay because we're married. Come on, just come with me. Come on. Come to the bathroom with me, right? And you'd be sitting there like going, what the heck, right? How many people want that type of a spouse? Right? Not a single, there's one hand, but that's okay. That is okay. That's a different sermon for later, okay? I'll make sure that sermon comes out a little bit later. And there's one, she's like, right? And everyone's just laughing, right? So here's the thing. No one wants that. And isn't that kind of weird that if you're going through a difficult time, you have to ask that person to keep saying to you, I'm with you, don't worry, I love you. Isn't that kind of weird, right? What we have to understand first is there's a time for everything. Right? Because think about this. After Joseph, they were enslaved for 400 years, right? For 400 years, right? Think about this. During the 400 years, was God coming down saying, hey guys, I'm with you, so don't worry about it. Just slave away. Don't worry, your back hurts. It's okay, because I'm with you. And then he goes back up. Does it happen like that? No, I know God doesn't talk like that, right? But right? Right? So if we think about this, it's not like that. It doesn't work like that, right? When did God actually save them? After the 400 years were over, right? Everyone take a look at Acts chapter 7, verse 6 through 7. We'll look at this on the screen. It says, God spoke to him in this way, to Abraham. For 400 your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated. Which means, number one is God set the time. There's a time that's set. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, God said, and afterwards they will come out of that country and worship me in that place, right? Time. Why is time so important? Because the number one thing is, there's a time set by God. There is. And if we don't realize that there's a time set by God, then during the process for those 13 years or 2 years in prison, you sit there saying, God, where are you? And the answer is He's there, right? But why doesn't He take action? Because the time is not right. How does that make sense? Think about this. Your parents are just the same. Why? Because if you're 5 years old and you say, God, please, Dad, help me get my license. Do you think your dad's going to start the car and start teaching you how to drive at 5 years old? He's not even going to talk about it. He might buy you a little car. No, play with that car and, practice driving with that thing, right? That's about it. But when does He actually start to help you learn how to drive? When you're about 15 and a half, right? When you're about 6 months away. 7 months away from getting your license, then your dad begins to act. Well, your dad is God too, right? Don't worry, right? So he begins to act at that point, at the right time. What about marriage? Wouldn't it be kind of weird if your daughter was like 4 years old and says, I want a baby. I want to have a baby right now. Would you start teaching the 4-year-old how to have a baby? Well, daughter, let me teach you how babies are made. Let me teach you how, this is church. I can't say anything, right? Right? You got to think about this very carefully. When it comes to your daughter or your son and they want to have babies at 4 and 5, we disregard it. We're not going to talk anything up. We don't care. Why? Because we know it's not the right time. So we leave it aside. But when you're 25, 26, right? 28, 29, I'm not sure when people are getting married nowadays, is when it's time to get married, this is when you start to actually learn about relationships, right? Or being with someone. And that's when your parents start to help you a lot more. And that's why parents don't nag about you getting married until you're old, right? They're not nagging you. It's like, hey, when you're going to get married or what? It's like, what? Well, you're 6 already, so, No, 6, no boyfriend yet? Yeah, pretty pathetic, right? Can you imagine that? Parents doing that at like 6 and 7 years old? Why don't they do that? Because it's not the right, even parents, even we do the same thing, right? We take action and we help people when in the right time, right? Even if a lot of you are students and go to school, no one starts helping each other out for the finals when it's like the beginning of the semester. You wouldn't even care, right? You'd rather go out and watch a movie. You'd rather go out and hang out with friends. And if your friends say, hey, can you really help me out? We've got finals 4 months away, right? Please help me, 4 months away, I have finals, right? And then you'd be like, right? Oh, you're so smart, right? Are you trying to make me feel bad, right? It's crazy to think about it. You're not gonna do it. When the time comes, then people begin to take action. And you have to realize too, with God, there is a set time that God makes for every single thing that we're going through. There is a set time, which means what? You need to wait for the time. And this is why sometimes it doesn't seem like God is doing anything. Why? Because He's not. He's not doing anything. Why? I'm not saying literally He's like, like leaving you, like casting you out. He's not helping you at that moment. Why? Because it's not the time. Number one, you have to wait for God's time. You do, which means that in the meantime, what is the second thing is? It's the responsibility of self. It's the reliance of self. What does that mean? Everyone take a look at Matthew chapter 7, verse 7 and 8. Very, very famous verse we know. Ask and it will be given. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be open. And here's the thing. The requirement that God gives to all of us is responsibility. It's what you need to do, right? God doesn't help you with what you're supposed to do. He doesn't. He doesn't need to help you chew your food. He doesn't. Unless you're a baby. Before they had these blenders and stuff, parents, for me too, they'd put in their mouth, they'd chew it up, and then they put in, like a bird, right? But they wouldn't do mouth to mouth, right? They put it back in a spoon, and they put it in my mouth, right? That's how old I am, right? There's no blenders, right? Like that, right? Right? Like, it's like, oh, right? And I'd be like, give me, I want mom's saliva, right? So we sit there like, this is what they did in the past. And the thing is, because you're a baby, you can't do it on your own. Right? But when you grow up, I'm sure it would be really weird if your mom still did that for you right now. No? Except for that one person like, I'm okay. I can do it. Yeah, right? So if you think about this, when it comes to what belongs to you, your responsibility, it belongs to you, and God doesn't touch that. Why? Because you can do it, right? Why would you help someone with something they can do themselves? It doesn't make any sense. They should do it themselves, right? They should. Are you going to work for someone else? Oh, I don't want to work today. Well, I'll work for you, right? Oh, yeah, I know. Don't work. Just go. Go have fun. I'll work for you. No one does that, right? The second thing you have to realize, number one is you have to realize about time, that God has a set time. But number two is you have to realize about self, which is responsibility of people who believe in God. Not just anyone, but responsibility of people who are mature in faith. Mature people in faith can do things on their own. What does that mean? You shun God? No. Doesn't mean you disbelieve or you say I don't have faith anymore, right? It just means that, God, I can do this, right? I can do this. Why? God doesn't take you to church, right? When you're like, God, I don't want to go. And He's like, here we go. Do. at church. Ha ha. Right? Right? Like, does God ever do that? It never happens, right? Who goes to church? You. And who decides not to go to church? You. You decide not to. That's not God like going, I want to go to church. No, you can't. Stay there, right? Like, oh, I can't. Oh, God's finger's on me. Oh, well, I might as well stay. God doesn't stop you. It's you. You came to church. You might have been inspired, but you came. That is your responsibility. It's the reliance of self. What does it mean, reliance of self? Reliance of self is not actually talking about that you're alone and no one's helping you. No, right? Everything in this world that God has been made with counterparts or with two. Like, for instance, what about a job, right? There's no job if there's no business. Right? The owner has to make the business, get the building, get all the computers and all the hardware, software. The owner has to do that. And what's your responsibility? You got to study. You got to study, go to school, get your degree, and then you go into the interview, right? There's always two parts that are happening. When it comes to school, the school builds the university. The school gives you the books, gets the teachers, gives you the curriculum. What do? You go to class, hopefully, right? And on top of that, you got to do the homework. There's always two sides to everything, right? The reason I say don't rely on God is because people are so far on that side where they think God is doing everything. And then when you don't do anything or when something goes wrong, you blame God for everything. That's why I'm talking don't rely on God. I'm switching your minds back to the middle. You forget about self, responsibility. When it comes to God, it's all there. And we have to realize part of it is us too. Part of it is us that we have to do what? Even eating is someone has to process and make the food and then you got to eat it. There's two responsibilities on everything. The reliance on self means what? It's the confidence in your maturity, the confidence in your faith, right? That because God has been with me, God has raised me and developed me and made me to this point. I can do this, God. I can. I don't need you to pick me up out of bed and throw me to church, right? I don't need you to. We have to realize there is a responsibility that each person has when it comes to Christ. There is a responsibility. And you have to realize this responsibility deeply in your hearts that you're not sitting there solely relying. How do you know you're relying on God? Is that when anything bad happens, you always blame God. That means you're too dependent upon God. You only see Him and nothing else. Problem is what? The problem is you only see God and nothing else. But you have to realize you're there too. You got to bring yourself to church. You got to bring yourself to read the Bible. You have to bring yourself to pray. You have to bring yourself to focus. You have to bring yourself to do the right things. This last thing I want to share with you, when I talked about mature faith, is we turn to Genesis chapter 26, verse 24. It's a very interesting verse, right? And this is when he appeared to Isaac, right? He says this to Isaac. He says, I'm the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you and will increase the number of your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. This last part is really important for us to have that self-awareness of where you are or the power that you should have. Where does this mature faith come in is? It's the belief in the promise itself. It's a belief. You got to believe. You have to have the faith in it. Does God have to tell you every single minute, I am with you, I am with you, I am with you? Does He have to? He doesn't. There's a promise. He says, I'm with you. And I will bless you and your descendants. Which means that Jacob, if he had this powerful faith, he wouldn't need God to say, I am with you. Why? Because he'd say, just as you said to my father Isaac, and just like you said to my father Abraham, you said not only would you bless them, you would bless the descendants, which is me. And I believe that promise, that you're with me. I absolutely believe that promise. I don't need to see you next to me, but I'll believe it. I don't need you to tell me in my ears, I'm with you, because I believe it. I don't need you to have that tingly feeling, oh, God is with me. How? Because I can feel the tingling in my arms. You don't need it, because God is with you. It's the belief, it's understanding. Where does the power in self come from? It's the belief in the promise that God has given to you. Does He really need to say it to you all the time? Does He really need to say, oh, don't worry? Really? Do you think God's ever going to say to you like, oh, you better worry? Gosh, you're in a crappy position. I don't know what to do. If I were you, probably just leave, right? Do you think God would ever say that? Honestly, do you think he'd ever say, why? He's like, oh God, just say it to me. Like really, like is that really gonna help you? If you really need him to say it to you, which probably means that you're so weak and you're so like shaking your faith, you're gonna probably ask that again, probably the next day. You gotta have that faith, that belief in the promise. He says he's gonna be with you, even more than before. That he never has to say it again, but you know, and you believe it, and you talk about it. That even if it's 13 years in servanthood, and you're like, God, well, what about that dream? You gave me this dream that I'm gonna be this great person, but God, I'm in prison for 13 years. You're fine. Did you ever hear about Joseph complaining? Oh, God, it's because of you. You gave me that dream. And then now I'm going to court for rape. And now I'm here for another 2 years. You gotta think about that carefully, right? Where do you stand right now with God? Where is the reliance? Also knowing that because God is with you, you can pull through until God's time comes. As people who believe in God, and as people who God is with, wait for the time. That's it. You gotta wait for it. That time is perfect. That time is at the right time, just when you need it the most, where the biggest impact will happen at the end. If it's too early, it's like an unripe fruit. If it's too late, it's overripe and it's sour. God's timing is greater than what we think and what we feel. What do I mean by don't rely on God? I'm saying change your mind and change your perspective of what you think it means to rely on God. God is with you, and he says, do not worry and just wait for God's time to come. And if you wait, then everything, all the things you worried about, the things that you're struggling with, they'll all be resolved at that time. But you need to wait. You need to be resilient. You need to have that faith that pushes through 13 years of servanthood, 2 years of imprisonment and being in a dungeon before you become the prime minister of an entire nation. We are all called to be kings, kings of Christ, and reign with him for 1,000 years. And that time will come. But you gotta wait for it. You gotta wait for God's time. Know that this thing that you go through right now is not it. God's time will come. Let's pray. Almighty God, we are so grateful and thankful that you've blessed us at this time, that you've given us everything that we need. But you, the living God, has promised us. It's not a human being that breaks promises. Because even if we look at our own lives, how many times have we broken promises? And we look at ourselves and all the broken promises from people all around us, and we see, wow, our promise is really that great? But this is a promise that comes from the Almighty, the everlasting God. You will never break this promise. And on that promise, let our faith be strong. And on that promise, let us truly believe in that no matter how dark it gets, no matter how hard it gets, that we'll pull through to the very end. We will wait for your time. We thank you so much for all that you've done for us today. I really hope that every person here has received that message that they need right now, that you will bless everyone here. Some of us are ready to get to your time. Some of us are about an hour away. Some of us are a week, a month, a year, and who knows, some people are even 13 years away. But we remain strong. We rely on that promise, knowing that you're with us. And let us be the ones that fulfill our responsibility and do what we should do each and every day. We thank you so much for all that you've done. We pray all these things in the name of our beloved Holy Son, Lord. Amen.
He can take you where you wanna go. He can take you where you wanna go. He can take you where you wanna go. He can show you what you wanna know.